Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praise to the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. I pray the Most High blesses this lesson this evening, gives us more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past, in order to understand events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. Brethren, as you see, the Most High is taking us up to another level. And every time He releases us to another level, events escalate all around the earth. And that's exactly what you're seeing going on right now. You're starting to see now how Russia's on the borders again with Ukraine. You see, things just escalating. Many times we've seen events just escalate and then go back down, escalate and go back down. And everybody retreats back to the original positions and everything else. But we understand that as we get more knowledge and understanding of our past, that it's going to bring the doom and destruction on everyone else. As you can see, they're living in a totally alternate reality. A reality that has been pretty much made up and reconstructed over the last couple of hundred years. They have taken our great histories and taken them on for themselves. And that's what we're going to concentrate on this evening. It's going to be really important for us to really get a good grasp on the whole situation with the Celts. Because, they admit, like they did in the movies, that the Celts were the original people with all this information. Just like they did in a Doctor Strange movie when it talks about the main, lady who was like the ancient one. How she was Celtish, or she was a Celt. And she was the one that, that was the ancient one. So they put their little signs everywhere. We're going to get a really good understanding this evening of how they assumed our identity over there. How the white British tried to pretty much usurp our history. And I'm sure they did exactly the same kinds of things all over the world. Because as we understand, the enemy doesn't do anything new. They just repeat the same things that have worked for them the whole time. And you're going to see how they stole the identity of the Celts for themselves, but then how the Most High, like it says in Revelations, how the earth is going to, help the woman. How the earth actually proved the lie that they told. And they had been pretty much, promoting for hundreds of years. But archaeological evidence came out that proved that they were lying about who they were, and they were lying about who the real Celts are. They're still here today. They've just had their history taken from them. A great and powerful people that had their history stolen from them. Going to get into this book right here that our brother Kudumeo shared a couple weeks ago, about the Phoenician origin of Britons, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons by L.A. Waddell. We're going to start right here on page 130. It's really going to give a good breakdown on how they stole our history and gave it to themselves, and how they were just real slick with it too. And I'm sure this is exactly how they've done it over here as well. Okay? In British history and literature, the first mention of Celts appears to be in 1607, in an incidental reference to the Celts, not in Britain, but in France. And again in 1656, in Blount's Glossography, which defines Celt one born in Gaul, and again in 1782, contrasting the British with the Celts in Gaul in the sentence. The obstinate war between the insular Britons and the continental Celts. But all of these references are unequivocally to the Celts in France and not in Britain. So see, they've already taken that land. They want to make it sound like the Celts weren't there, but these are the Celts that were over in, Gaul and France, but not in Britain. Okay. The manner in which the notion of a Celtic ancestry for the British, Scots, and Irish was insidiously introduced into British literature now becomes evident and affords a striking example of the inception and growth of a false theory. And see, they make a lot of false theories and they present them as facts. And when people don't have the books or, the understanding or the real history, then they're pretty much going to believe everything that they're told. And we've been, guilty of that because that's what they've manipulated our people, and they still do all the way till today. They still do the same things as far as manipulation, and history all the way till today. Nothing new. The credit for the first introduction of this notion into Britain, a notion which by frequent repetitions and accretions grew to be the greatest stumbling block to clear thinking on the Celtic question, now appears to be due to a Mr. Jones. In 1706, he published an English translation of Abbé Pezron's book issued in 1703 on Antiquity de la Nation et de la Langue des Celtes, under the title of Antiquities of Nations, more particularly of the Celtae or Gauls, taken to be originally the same people as our ancient Britons. They're already starting right there, stealing our ancestry, right there. Already, there's the first shot right there. Taken to be originally the same people as our ancient Britons. Now that's how they transfer them from being so-called black people to so-called white Anglo-Saxons. Okay, so in which he gave currency to that theory of Miss Pezron. The seed thus thrown into receptive British soil seems to have taken root and grown into a sturdy tree, which now is popularly believed to be indigenous. And of course they want that history. It's a very rich history. It's a history of a great people. And they want to be associated with that greatness. So they're going to do everything to attach themselves here in, in the present times to these people that were there thousands of years ago. This is how Psalms 83 came about, how they erased us from history. Just like it talks about the Psalms of Solomon, how they obliterated our memory from history. Like I talked about also in 2nd Esdras, how we were not going to be a people anymore. This is showing you how they did it. This is showing you how these prophecies have been executed already in the past. See, these Gentiles are still looking for all these prophecies to happen in the future, or they just skip these kinds of prophecies altogether. They don't want you to hear about how they blotted out an entire race of people and they stole the history for themselves. But see, these are the kinds of things that need to be brought out in order to show the people where we really are in prophecy. The vast majority of the world has no idea. Only prophecy they know is left behind. Only history they know is Ish in the so-called Middle East going back into the land. Supposedly that's the promised land. That's all that they know. They don't get an alternative. They don't get to have their own opinion. They don't get to come up with their own conclusions. Everything has to pretty much fit the way that they have set up prophecy. When the hidden understanding is right here, and the vast majority of the world is totally oblivious to it. So let's go ahead and continue right here. Okay. Thus, in 1757, Tyndall, in translating Rapin's History of England, says in his introduction, Great Britain was peopled by the Celtae or Gauls. So here we go. They're continuing with this lie that Great Britain was peopled by the Celtae, or the Gauls. In 1773, the theory that the Celts were ancestors of the Gaels and had become current in Skye, for Mr. McQueen, in a discussion there with Samuel Johnson, says, as they, the Scythians, were the ancestors of the Celts in sense of British, the same religion might be in Asia Minor and Skye. And in 1831, the seedling Celtic tree had become established in Britain as a mighty monarch of the forest, which sheltered the Aryan theory of the Celts under its branches, with the Celts as full-blooded Aryans in race. In that year, Dr. Pritchard, the ethnologist and a philologist, in his Eastern Origin of the Celtic Nations, describes the supposititious British Celts as Aryans in race, and ascribes to them the introduction of the various Aryan dialects current before the Anglo-Saxon period in the British Isles. And in 1851, Sir Daniel Wilson, the antiquary, calls the British Isles the insular home of the Celtae. The transformation of the people of the British Isles into Celt was then complete. So this is showing you right here how they usurped our heritage and took it upon themselves. So then when you talk about the Celts, oh, yeah, that's us. You talk about the great accomplishments of the Celts, oh, that's us. Oh, you talk about the Druids and how they had all these great schools and his magic and his power, oh yeah, that's us too. The transformation of the people of the British Isles into Celt was then complete. Your history, my history, our history has been lost. And they took it, knowing damn well they're not the people. But they are allowed to masquerade along with this lie for a little while longer before the Most High exposed them. And it's funny how they get exposed and you don't really hear too much about, hey, once they get exposed, what's the next question? Well, if you guys aren't the Celts, who are they? See, those kinds of questions never get answered. If they're not the people, then who are the real Hebrews? See, those are the questions that are never answered, never really brought up. They just continue with the lie. Even though they can't prove who's who. They can't prove who the Celts are. They're not going to actually go and look to see who fits the prophecies. Same thing with Ish. They're not going to go and look at who fits the prophecies because it's never been about the truth. It's only been about ignorance and lies and keeping up the lies. Even when they're caught, they still continue with the lies. Nothing new under the sun, correct? So if they've done this over there with them, what do you think they did over here in the Americas? Exactly the same thing. They took away the true identity of the people and gave it to someone else. And now that we are being awakened and we are claiming our heritage once again, they just continue to ignore the facts because that's in their nature. Hence why at the end, it's going to be a huge surprise for the vast majority of the world. Just like it talks about in Matthew 28, how the whole world is mourning because they all have been duped. They all have believed the lie. They all drank the Kool-Aid. They're guzzling it down, not even coming up for air. Because, to actually step back and look at, start to really analyze things, that takes some effort. And they're not really willing to put forth very much effort. Let's continue. The older philologists were thus mainly responsible for this arbitrary extension of the name Celtic in a racial sense to the earlier inhabitants of the British Isles. The confusion arose through the popular misconception that because a people spoke a dialect of the same group of languages, they were necessarily of the same race. The confusion began with the observation by the French philologists that the language of the Celts in Brittany and Mid-Gaul, or Celtic speech, as it was naturally called by them, was essentially similar in structure to that of the Brythonic or Cymry speech of the Welsh, and the Breton of Brittany and Gaul. This Brythonic language was then presumed to be a branch of the Celtic of Gaul, and the term Celtic applied to it, and then extended in a racial sense to the Welsh people who spoke it. Similarly, the Gaelic or Gadelic speech of the Irish and the Scottish Highlanders was also found to have affinity with the Gaelic and Welsh Celtic, and all the people speaking those languages were also dubbed Celts. So they just, hey, you know, it's just like a big ass, this is a big old party. Hey, if you all speak the language, you're all Celts. You're a Celt, I'm a Celt, we're all Celts. If you just speak the same language, you're all the same race. As long as it's not you, Negroes. As long as it's not you so-called black people, it can be anybody else. It just can't be you. The linguistic affinities on which this racial kinship was assumed were tabulated in two groups by Dr. Lathan in 1841, based on a classification by Pritchard and C. Meyer. And this still remains the recognized classification of the Celtic dialects, of which the Gaelic is considered to be the more primitive and older. Okay, so you got that right there. Celtic group of languages. Still further had the Celtic theory grown apace. This so-called Celtic race was also called Aryan in race, when it was observed that their language was akin to the languages which had laterly been classed as Aryan. This essentially racial title of Aryan had been introduced into English and other European languages by the discovery in 1794, okay, by the erudite Sir William Jones, the Chief Justice of Calcutta. So see, I mean, it's not even that long, 1794. So these people act like they have such a long and, you know, established history, you know, and these things that they were doing, you know, really is close to the 1800s. Not very long at all, a couple hundred years. You got your couple hundred years of living a lie. And now the Most High is working to tear down those lies. This is all part of prophecy. This is all part of waking up in the lands of our captivities. See, this is why we have to get into these different subjects, because who else is going to? The Gentiles will not touch these subjects, because they know that once you start to peel back that onion, you start to just barely get a little bit of that skin off, that everything just begins to unravel. This is why we are called, our Hebrew nation is called to get this information, work through it, and bring out the light and bring out the truth. That is our mission. That is our, you know, calling, to bring light to the world. And that's why we have to get into these different books. We need to get our hands on this information in order to get the true spirit of truth looking into these books and bringing out this information. The other nations don't have the spirit to bring this out. See, they got the exoteric understanding. They got just the facts. They got the dates. They got the facts of the information. But the esoteric understanding has to be given to our people in order to bring this out. We're the ones that have to have the spirit to go into, you know, the facts that they have and be able to, you know, navigate through all the lies and bring out the truth. That is what we do. That is what our people do. See, we have been blessed. Okay? If, like, when the other nations had our Bible, they were able to control the masses with it. They were able to read it. They were able to, you know, do a little something with it here and there. But once we, the Most High's chosen people, get the Bible, we tear it up. We destroy all other doctrines. That's the difference between us and the other nations. We can have the same books. We can have the same information. But in the Gentiles' hands, it can only go so far. When it's in the Hebrew Israelites' hands, all bets are off, because we have the Spirit that will then give us the deeper meaning and the deeper understanding that is hidden within the pages. That is the difference with everything that we touch. Yes, the Gentiles can get information. They can do great things with some of the information. They can do good things with some of the stuff. But when the Hebrews get the information and we have the Spirit of the Most High, it's game over. See, I'm sure many of our people have read these books and and gotten this information. But once the Spirit comes and starts making connections with this book and this information and this Bible here, and the second stick here, and you start seeing other information, you start seeing the book of Enoch here, you start seeing Jasher here, you start bringing all this other understanding that the other nations don't have. That's when the esoteric understanding and the much deeper revelations start to come out. And that works with everything. That works with all scripture, all books, all reading, everything. That's how it works with science. That's how it works with math. That's how it works with everything. And see, the other nations know that. So what do? They don't try to give you an equal footing. They don't say, hey, you know what? Yeah, you guys can read it too, and we'll see what we how it all works out. If our understanding is going to be better than yours. They already know that their understanding is not going to be as good as ours. So what do? They don't have an option. They don't have an option of being fair. They don't have an option of, hey, you know what? Here's the books. What are you guys going to get out of it? Us Gentiles are going to read it, and you Hebrews read it, and we'll see who gets more information. They already know how that's going to go. The Hebrews will destroy them with understanding. We will destroy them with understanding, just like we do in sports. Anything that we touch, if it's equal, we dominate. Even if it's not even equal, we're still going to dominate because we're the Most High's chosen people. And it is evident through actions. It is evident through, results. That's why they have to hide your information. That's why they have the books hidden from you. That's why they keep you out of books by telling you that they're evil and don't read it, because they know that they cannot compete with you, because you have the Spirit that they have never had. So let's continue. Okay, so we got, by the erudite Sir William Jones, the Chief Justice of Calcutta, that the Sanskrit language of the ancient Hindus, who call themselves Arya, was radically and structurally of the same type as the Old Persian, Greek, Latin, Celtic, English, and German, or Teutonic, languages of Europe, and that the culture and mythology of the ancient Hindus was essentially analogous to that of ancient Greece and Rome and of the Goths. There we go with the ancient Greece and Rome. They got themselves in there, right? We already know about that whole ancient Greece and Rome garbage. The physical appearance also of the pure Hindus, claiming to be the descendant of the highly civilized ancient Aryas, resembled generally that of the North European peoples of Britain and Scandinavia. It was then assumed that the ancient Aryas, who civilized India and Persia or Iran and gave them their Aryan speech, were presumably of the same common racial stock as the ancestors of the civilizers of Greece and Rome. The civilizers, okay. And Northern Europe, who had in prehistoric time civilized Europe and imposed on it their Aryan speech. This Indo-European stock of peoples was thus called the Aryan race. And the name Aryan was extended also to their several languages and dialects, which were classed as Aryan or Indo-European, or by usurping German writers, Indo-Germanic. Thus, the so-called Celtic languages were called a branch of Aryan speech, and the Celts themselves called Aryans in race. And to these Celts, the philologists and ethnologists arbitrarily assigned the credit for first introducing the Aryan language and Aryan culture into Alban or Britain and Ireland. Here we go. Now the truth is coming out. Now the Most High is starting to expose them. Disillusionment, however, came in the year 1864, not even a century later, when scientific anthropologists following Anders Ritzius, the Swede, had begun to apply exact measurement to the skulls and physical types of the various so-called branches of the Aryan race. What did we say? As soon as they start to peel that onion back, you start to get a little bit of research in, that your whole house of cards falls apart. And that's exactly what's happening right here. They're probably like, look, just take our word for it. Don't do any research. Don't go check this stuff out. But they went and checked it out anyways. Esau always wanted to, he's bored, so he's going to start checking stuff out, and he might not like what he's going to find. Okay? So, and physical types of the various so-called branches of the Aryan race, as it had been found that the shape of the skull or head form afforded the best of all criterions of race. In that year, M. Paul Broca, who had begun 4 years earlier a systematic measurement of the head forms of the people of France, published his famous monograph on the head forms of the Celts of Brittany, the descendants of the original Celts of Caesar and of the classic writers. He found that so far from these Celts being of the Aryan physical type, namely tall, fair, and long-headed, they were, on the contrary, a short, darkish complexioned and round-headed race. So when they started looking at the heads, they found the total opposite of what they said they were. So he found that so far from these Celts being of the Aryan physical type, namely tall, fair, and long-headed, they were, on the contrary, a short, darkish complexioned and round-headed race. Just like Jacob and Esau. Total opposites, right? The next year, 1865, appeared the celebrated collection of measurements of the ethnic types in the British Isles by Davis and Thurman. Okay, Thurman. And their Crania Britannica, on which they had been engaged since 1860. And Dr. Beddoes' papers, this disclosed conclusively that the Celtic-speaking people of the British Isles, and more particularly the Welsh, were also short and dark complexioned, but with long heads or medium long heads, and thus were a markedly different racial type to the Celts of Gaul. Whilst their skull form and complexion excluded the greater portion of them from the Aryan racial type and affiliated them to the Iberians. So now it's like, okay, pretty much just whilst their skull form and complexion alone excluded the greater portion of them from the Aryan racial type and affiliated them to the Iberians. So yeah, they weren't Aryans just by their race, their complexion and skull form alone. They were much closer to the Iberians, Africans. And I'm sure this is a huge blow to a lot of these white British Aryans who wanted to, take our history for themselves, take our great history, the great accomplishments of our people for themselves. And the Most High already, showed that was not true. But you still got people today running around saying they're the Celts who look like they're Aryans. Because even though this information comes out, this is the kind of information that they just ignore, skip over. They don't want to believe it. They're going to continue with the lie. And the vast majority of our people will go right along with the lie with them. Even though there was plenty of information already shown back then that it wasn't true. But see, that's how the Most High has been working. He's been using a lot of these Gentiles to go out, get this information, put it in these books, so that when we awaken at the end, the Most High gives us the Spirit, and then we're able to get this information. And through the Spirit, we're able to kill the information, bring it out. We're able to be that light. Hey, did you guys remember this story? We can say like, hey, do you guys remember this? This survey. Do you guys remember when you guys did this research right here? Because you guys aren't going to bring it out, so it's our job to bring it out. We're going to be like, hey, you know what? Yeah, the stuff you guys have been saying is a bunch of BS. It's a bunch of lies. Yeah, I know you guys have seen this research, but you just kind of bury it. But that's okay. We'll bring it out because Most High is going to give it to us to bring out, because that's our job. We are to wake up in the lands of our captivity. So therefore, we are the ones who are supposed to get this information. And we're the ones who are supposed to be fulfilling prophecy, just like we're doing right now. Oh, and there's more. Those startling discoveries by scientific methods, excited great commotion amongst the ethnologists and philologists, as it disproved their accepted theory that the Celts of Gaul were of the same kindred as the Celts of the British Isles, and that both were Aryans. Whereas it was now disclosed, on the contrary, that they were of different races and that neither were of the Aryan race, although both spoke an Aryan language and different dialects. So just because you speak a certain dialect or a certain language doesn't make you those people. Your whole theory that you tried to push was proven false. Even though you still act like it's, you don't see this, you haven't seen this research. That's okay. You need to be able to go ahead and live your lie until now, until the Most High raises up his people. If these people are lying about this, what else are they lying about? This is why we need to be delving into different books and different information in order to find our truth. It is not up to the other nations to tell us the truth, because they're not going to. Trust me, I'm sure many Gentiles know this information. Have they been bringing it out? Have you seen any other Gentiles bring out this information? Have you seen other Gentiles trying to, hey, you know what? You guys are, you're the Celts. You're the original Celts. You're the ones with the great history. You're the ones that, the Roman Church, destroyed, and you're the ones that they took all their information from. So they're not going to tell you that, because that's our job. That's the job of the Hebrew Israelites. Everything that we touch turns to gold. The other nations know it. That's why they don't let us touch our records. Get that? Every time, anything that we touch, when we have the Holy Spirit, when the Holy Spirit said to us, anything that we touch turns to gold. The other nations know it. So what do? Keep you from touching your records. Scare you. They can't physically stop you right now because you've been awakened. So they got to mentally destroy you, mentally keep you away from your records. That's what they're doing now. Before, they would just beat us and kill us if we tried to read, right? Then when we could read, they made it seem as if, it was cool to be an idiot. It was cool to be dumb. It was cool to not read and not study. Hey, just play some sports. Entertain me. You don't want to be that smart guy. A smart guy doesn't get the girls. You want to be the idiot, that, doesn't really know anything, but the girls like him. That's what you need to do. Because they know that we are the priests, all right, the kings and queens. We are the Most High's chosen people. We know that we're a much higher evolutionary, species or beings than they are. So therefore, they need to keep us down any way that they can. So this is huge, because this proved that this huge theory that they were pushing all this time, they knew they weren't the people, but they pushed the theory anyways. And they push these theories like they're facts. And even when they're proven wrong, they still continue to push the theory. So let's read this part one more time, because it's that important. Those startling discoveries by scientific methods. They're always saying, follow the science and everything. Well, are they following it here? Those startling discoveries by scientific methods, excited great commotion amongst the ethnologists and philologists, as it disproved their accepted theory that the Celts of Gaul were of the same kindred as the Celts of the British Isles, and that both were Aryans, whereas it was now disclosed, on the contrary, that they were of different races, and that neither were of the Aryan race, although both spoke an Aryan language in different dialects. These scientific results were fully confirmed by further measurements, which were also extended over the greater part of Europe. As these measurements disentangle the British Celts from the continental and also sharply differentiate the Aryan type from both, it was necessary to glance at their leading results, which are here displayed in the accompanying table and illustrated in figure 22. Okay, so I just went down to the bottom. The third one, Iberian or Mediterranean and riverbed. Brown skin right there, brown to dark. Even the Alpine or Celtic was fair to brown. Okay, so brown to dark. You got dark people in that, but see, in all these movies, they're never showing you black and brown people being in these areas, because they want to continue with the lie about them being Aryans and only Aryans there the whole time. That's why people like Will and many other, Gentiles, seem to think they can just come onto the boards and come on the comment board and say how wrong you are, how there's never been black people there until Romans took them around in slavery. There was never any black people around, England and Ireland until the Romans brought slaves. That just shows you how, how these people are. They don't do any research because, A, they don't want to do any research, because as soon as they do, they get their feelings hurt. So it shows three main racial types in the population of modern Europe, all three of which we shall find represented in Britain, namely the Aryan or Nordic in the northern, tall, fair, broad-browed, long or longish heads, Alpine or Celtic, okay, continental or Germanic, short-statured, fair or darkish, broad-browed, round, and broad heads. And the third one, Iberian or Mediterranean, shortish statured, dark, narrow-browed, long-faced, long heads, and including the prehistoric riverbed type of the Picts. So they got the riverbed Picts also. The best of the distinguishing criterion of the race is the head, index, and second column of the table, in conjunction with color. There you go. But color never matters, though, right? Yeah. We're talking about why Jesus, it doesn't matter, right? But you start going into the history. Like I said, someone was saying before, the digger you deep, the blacker the people get, the darker the people get. The digger you deep, the deeper you dig, the blacker the population is. So the more ancient you get into, the people, the more black, the more so-called black or negroid features these people have. Huge information, and it shows you right here how they've been trying to steal the history, and the Most High exposes them. Now, something that kind of when you understand, you got the Northern Kingdom and you got the Southern Kingdom, and they've been trying to make it seem as if the natives were not black either, that they were really really light skinned people and whatever else. But they just try to hide a lot of that information. It's the same things the same MO and the same modus operandi they do over there in Europe. Trust me, they did it over here as well. They put a different people there and say, oh no, these are the ones that have been here the whole time. All the while, the ones that have been here, also, they actually hide. Now, were some of the natives that are here now, were they there back then? Quite possibly. But we were too. We weren't all just brought over here on slave ships. And that's exactly what, a lot of these Gentiles want to push. We were already here. We were already established here. Those are the things that need to be, fessed up to and acknowledged. It was not just light-skinned Native Americans that were here. We were here. And as long as you guys continue to ignore that fact, the rougher it's going to be when the Most High starts to bring more truth out and starts to reestablish his people. It's all about blessing the true Israelites. I'm sure that we had a mix of people here, just like there was a mix of people over there in Europe as well. But the one group that everyone seems to always want to agree that wasn't anywhere was the so-called Negroes, was the so-called Israelites. Everyone wants to agree that we weren't anywhere in these lands before that, before slavery. But this is something that I wanted to show also about the power that our people had. We know about the Druids and the magical powers that they had, the esoteric teachings in their schools, the magic that they had. That was definitely associated with the Druids. Now we know that the priests over here had power as well. But this talks about even more about what Quetzalcoatl could do. But the information that he had and how he shared it. Did he share it? Because remember, we started talking about that, about sharing the information with everyone. Or did he share it with a specific group of people? When he died, did he give it to everyone? Remember, we talked about how when Adam gave his information down, passed on down to his posterity. Enoch had his information. Noah had his information. Passed that down to Moses, right? Abraham had the information. Passing it down to specific people. Same thing was happening over here. So just like the Druids had power, had magical powers, so did our ancestors over here. And that's what this is talking about right here. Quetzalcoatl appeared as the great sorcerer, magician, or necromancer. He performed miracles, and upon his departure, his secrets were entrusted to an order of priests, governed by Hierophant or master. This priesthood practiced the arts and sciences, treated the sick, administered sacraments, and were diviners and prophets. Then it gives some consideration to the activities of these religious orders. Now, see, this is why they're always trying to take away our history. Just like they did with the Celts, they did the same thing with the priests over here, with Quetzalcoatl. As you can see, Quetzalcoatl right here is looking real dark. And there's other pictures in this book about the adepts that shows them, like a so-called Negro. This is why they want to steal your history and disconnect you from your history, because then they disconnect you from your power. Then you realize, oh, hold on, Quetzalcoatl appeared as a great sorcerer, so he was doing magic. He was a magician and a necromancer, and so he's bringing people back from the dead. Okay, just like Yahushua did, right? Okay. He performed miracles, and upon his departure, his secrets were entrusted to an order of priests. So the same things that you're hearing about that was going on over there in the so-called Middle East, and over in the British and Isles and Ireland, was happening over here as far as magic, power, and this information was only handed down to a specific group of people. This is why they want to say, oh no, those were our people. Those were us Aryans. So there they can sit there and say, that we were the ones with the power. We were the ones that did this. We were the ones that did that. And if you try to touch it, that's witchcraft. But if we touch it, well, it's okay because it was ours originally anyways. So we were the ones that were using it, for good. But if you so-called black people get your hands on it, that's black magic. That's evil. When we were the ones that were using it for good initially. And the Father is now working to give us back our heritage. Once you realize that this heritage does not connect to the Aryans or the so-called, white people, but it's actually your history, then you'll start to look at history way different. You start to make those connections. And you start to see the power that our people had before, and how the Most High said he was going to restore our people once again. If he's going to restore our people, that means also he's going to restore the power that we had before as well. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to reconnect with your history and have the Holy Spirit show you the truth. And you're not dependent upon Gentiles to break it down for you after they've said that really we're the Celts or we're this and we're that. Now we understand that they were none of those things. Those were our people. And the Most High is working to restore our heritage back to our people. All praise the Most High Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who was wisdom? Who was the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahushua. Shalom.